I want to welcome my friend Paul Street, who's a labor historian and civil rights researcher by training. He's a prolific writer, author of 9 books, his latest being This Happened Here, Amerikaners, Neoliberals, and the Trumping of America. Paul is also a member, along with myself and my co-hosts Sansara Taylor and Coco Das, of the editorial board of Refuse Fascism. And as such, he's been very active in Rise Up for abortion rights, including going to Washington, D.C. in the run-up to the Supreme Court decision that took away the right to abortion. And Paul also writes regularly for the website Counterpunch. And on August 1st, he published a column titled, "Why is the left red-baiting Rise Up for abortion rights on the eve of fascist destruction?" So I am pleased that he is joining me today from Chicago via Zoom. Welcome, Paul Street.
Hi there, Andy. Glad to be here.
Okay, so Paul, you wrote at the beginning of your article the following. Rise Up for Abortion Rights, RU4AR, the organization that has led the struggle against the Christian fascist war on women's right to control their own reproductive lives. Each of the charges made against the organization is false and libelous, including preposterous and baseless claims of financial corruption. None of the false claims, you write, made against RU4AR is more provocative and chilling than the claim that it is nothing more than a front group for the Revolutionary Communist Party, which is in turn described as a cult under the spell of Bob Avakian. So I wonder if you could comment on this.
Well, many of these charges rise literally to the level of libel. And are baseless and made without the slightest hint of evidence. This cult thing has resonated, and you've talked about a number of them in the show already, is my understanding. This cult thing resonates among certain liberal, there's no ideology to it, across the ideological spectrum with various groups and folks, including those on the left. I don't know if people know exactly what a cult is. A personality cult would be such that if Bob Avakian, the leader of the Revcoms, were to overnight embrace Christian fundamentalism or become a militant 9/11 truther, an anti-vaxxer, or to become a kind of revisionist centrist social democrat or something like that, that all his followers would follow in line with that. And that's not the case of anyone that I've met that associated with the Revcoms at all. It's just utterly preposterous. In the claim of cult and cultism that's made, there's just no curiosity that I ever get from the people making this charge at all about what Avakian has written, what Avakian thinks, and why Avakian is considered a powerful and influential thinker among a whole bunch of people who consider themselves revolutionary socialists and communists. And I just, I find that really quite extraordinary. And it's a really sort of preposterous charge, to say the least.
Yeah, maybe we'll get into this a bit later. It's a very dangerous charge. It's the demonization of revolutionary leaders is a long history in this country, a long and a dangerous history. And when it gets combined with charges like of funneling money and things like this, all of which is, as you say, absolutely baseless, it creates a danger towards a revolutionary leader. This country has never tolerated revolutionary leaders, and even leaders who are leading significant mass protests for reform, like Dr. King. You write in your piece on Counterpunch that this attack is especially reckless and insidious because of the historical moment in which it is taking place.
It's just absolutely extraordinary. It's one of the most curious and telling things about the attack is that it comes literally the day after the decision and is taken up by a liberal magazine that calls itself called Jezebel, by a progressive Zine people are familiar with called The Intercept, and it goes up on something called New York City for Abortion Rights and is signed by 23 repro groups. And, this is what they chose to do on the day after the decision that abolished the 50-year constitutional right to an abortion. Not join us and others in the streets, in the public squares, not to launch a jerry-made of blistering properly critical attacks on the decision, not to engage in direct action and shut shit down like we were advocating, not to call like we did, like Rise Up for Abortion Rights did for legal abortion across the land, but to issue a statement attacking the one leading top national organization that in a principled and militant and energized fashion, literally from the minute the Supreme Court took up this case in December of last year and all the way through the whole half year leading up to the decision, that argued against any advance surrender to a post-Roe era, and that developed techniques and direct action and slogans and rallies and marches and Instagram posts and the whole panoply of direct actions and social movement interventions to provide and prevent this decision in advance. The decision comes, and what the hell do they do? What do they do with this historical moment? They attack Rise Up for Abortion Rights, a united front organization in which, yes, there were revcoms, in which there were refused fascism people, in which there were liberals, in which there were progressives, in which there were moderates, everyone who was dedicated to direct militant social movement activism to try and shake the foundations of this country and send a message to Washington, D.C. You will not steal this fundamental human right that was won by struggle. The one organization that stayed true to how abortion rights were won in the very, very first place. And, you know, that's just incredibly telling and extraordinarily significant that that's how they decided to respond to that. Now, I've had people push back on me when I say this is like McCarthyism or this is like COINTELPRO. I actually think in some ways it's worse, because this attack on a left-led group, the red baiting of the quote-unquote cult shaming of it, the red baiting of it, the libeling of it, the baseless accusations of which are no evidence of financial misappropriation, of cultural appropriation, the whole list of preposterous charges comes at a particular moment in time where literally in this country, with the assault on abortion rights as the leading spear of the attack, as the leading battering ram, is literally the bourgeois democracy, electoral democracy, and previously normative constitutional rule of law is now on potentially its last legs in this country. And they are calling out and demonizing and shaming and red baiting an organization, a united front organization, in a time where there's 440 million weapons in this country, in which there are just 30,000 militia members frothing neo-fascist Amerikaners willing to do violence, and a vast police state on the edge of aiding and abetting these militias and fascists in the conclusion of the bourgeois democratic era. In some ways, it's worse than the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and what was done to the Haymarket martyrs and all that, because we are at the end, and they don't get this. They don't get this timing of this era that we're in. They don't understand that they're playing with fire, that they're aiding and abetting neo-fascism in a time when there's a mass base for neo-fascism and a whole part of the American ruling class has gone over to neo-fascism. And it's incredibly reckless, and it's despicable, to be perfectly honest with you.
You propose 10 reasons why they might have done this, okay? And it did, I have to say, when I was rereading the article, it made me think of the late night talk show by David Letterman, who some of our audience probably knows and others don't. But every show, he would start with the top 10 reasons or the top 10 list.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a copy of tonight's top 10 list.
Ladies and gentlemen, here's tonight's top 10 list.
Forgive me, I'm going to do that with your top 10 list so that we can then go into two of the points in some depth in this interview. Number one. These haters have a commitment to insider strategies of elite lobbying and major party electioneering. Number two, fury at being called out for advanced surrender to the reversal of Roe versus Wade. Number three, jealousy. Rise Up for Abortion Rights has challenged the choice establishment's appeasement with great talent and elan. Number 4, turf protection. Number 5, clickbait, salacious conspiracy mongering. Number 6, in an anti-communist witch hunt. Number 7, failure to grasp the dire historical moment and deprecate the Revcom's observation that we are now facing a fascist section of the ruling class. Number 8, fake socialist inability to grasp the necessity of revolution. The democratic socialists' pitifully tame commitment to incremental and economistic reformism. Number 9, sleepy woke uber identitarianism. And number 10, desire to appropriate RU4IR's tactics and absorb them into top-down insider strategy. Okay. So, look, I think those capture a whole lot of stuff. People should read the article and have some fun with them. So, Paul, first I'd like to get into your points 1 through 3 sort of together. But the essence of it is that the Democrats and these NGOs, which stands for non-governmental organizations that have been the form and the agency of the pacification of struggle into social service. In other words, instead of struggle of the people for their rights, we set up these non-governmental organizations, charities essentially, who are tied to politically and economically to social service and to channel any resistance they do mobilize into elections. So, for example, they sometimes will call a protest, but only for the purpose of channeling into voting and fundraising. And some of these small little leftist sects, like the socialist feminist group that New York City for abortion rights, they do some clinic defense and they do some small things, but a small thing at the edges of the larger problem that people in this country are facing with this fascist juggernaut and a political opposition in the ruling class that is no opposition or not much of an opposition. So I think you had a number of observations on this that'd be worth hearing from you about.
It was really quite extraordinary, the extent to which these groups, and you can see it in their literature, not only surrendered in advance to these organizations. I'm referring to the Democratic Party. I'm referring to Planned Parenthood. I'm referring to NARAL. And I've seen a lot of their literature and saw it over the half year leading up to the well-telegraphed Dobbs v. Jackson decision, not only surrendering in advance to the undoing of the 50-year constitutional right to an abortion, but sounding like they saw it as an opportunity to increase funds for their direct service operations. And I heard actually from Democratic Party folks in Iowa looking forward to the decision as an electoral opportunity, as something that would work for them in the midterm elections. And of course, that's how they're talking about it right now. They didn't, but not just after. Even before, and beneath all of this is and this kind of opportunistic and cynicism is a contempt for the people, a contempt for the types of struggle that won right to an abortion in the first place. That's called social movements. That's called people in the streets and the public squares. That's called people shutting stuff down. That's called people confronting power. They have contempt for that. They have contempt for the rank and file. They have contempt for the grassroots. They want everything to be handled from the top up or the middle out. Leave it to us. We know what we're doing. We're going to lobby. We're going to protect your rights with campaign funding and campaigns. We'll put the right people in the place. That doesn't work. That's not how anything that's been won that's worth defending in this country has ever been won. It's always taken social struggle in the streets. It's true of the labor movement. It's true of the civil rights movement. It's true of the anti-war movement. And it was certainly true of the women's rights movement in the 60s and the 70s. They don't like that because once you open the door to that kind of activism, people meet and they form organizations and they exchange ideas and they call into question the accommodations of the middle professional class and upper class elites. And they start talking about things like revolution, and they start talking about having a regular popular presence in the streets, this is the consistent line that was coming from the mainstream liberal establishment choice organizations throughout. Leave it to us. And that wasn't Rise Up's perspective. And they had to pay a price. They had to be penalized for doing that. We showed them up. Okay. There was a presence in the streets the minute that this decision came down saying, hell no, this decision must not stand, legal abortion across the land. Your approach didn't work. Your approach doesn't work. And to them, that's sinful. That's a horrific attitude to have taken, and must be penalized and must be punished and must be demonized.